Nora Cade paid $1 for 38 acres nobody else wanted. The clerk at the Hawthorne County Property Office slid the deed across the counter, then kept one hand on it. "The dollar is only what goes on the paper," he said. "Taxes, filing fees, and everything on that land belong to you now." The agreement carried one hard deadline. By October 1st, Nora had to open a fire access lane from the county road to the old culvert. If she failed, the county would hire a crew and place the cost against the property. 2 previous owners had tried brush cutters. Hidden irrigation pipe, wire, and fallen limbs had stopped both of them. Nora signed anyway. The pasture she rented for her 15 goats was being sold. At the property, pecan grower Wade Doolin studied the wall of blackberry, greenbrier, privet, and multiflora rows. "They'll eat the edges," he said. "Reaching the middle before fall is another matter." 2 neighbors laughed when Nora lowered the trailer gate. The goats stepped into the first green leaves. Beyond them, the briars showed no opening at all. Nora's first paddock was too large. At the start, that hardly seemed to matter. The goats moved eagerly along the fence, stripping blackberry leaves, reaching into greenbrier, and taking the soft, new tips from the rose canes. For 3 days, the edge of the property looked better every evening. Then the easy browse ran out. Instead of forcing through the old tangled canes, the goats began pacing the netting, searching for gaps. One section sagged where hidden wire had caught the mesh. Before Nora could reach it, the fence pulled loose and dropped into the brush. She found one doe standing apart with a shallow cut above the hoof. It was not serious, but Nora stopped the whole paddock and spent the afternoon probing the ground for more wire. By the 8th day, the goats had cleared little more than a narrow strip beside the gate. Tess Cade, Nora's 22-year-old daughter, arrived with the cash flow book under her arm. Fence posts, hauled water, fuel, and repairs were rising faster than the fire lane was moving. "They need more time," Nora said. Tess rested one finger on the unfinished line drawn across the deed map. "More time doing this?" she asked. "Or more time finding a better way?" Nora looked past the cleared strip. The old canes beyond it had barely moved. She knew goats. She did not yet understand this ground. Nora stopped treating the property like one large field. She cut narrow browse lanes instead, each one just wide enough for her to check the ground before setting the netting. Red ribbon marked the first lane, yellow the next, then blue and white farther in. Tess started a row ledger. She recorded when the goats entered, how long they stayed, what they ate first, how quickly the brush returned, and what each lane cost in posts, water, and labor. Nora moved the herd before the best browse was gone. When blackberry and rose pushed out fresh leaves, she brought them back. The old canes remained, but after the second pass, they carried less weight. Some leaned far enough for the goats to step several feet deeper than before. In the 4th lane, 3 goats kept rising onto their hind legs beside a thick column of vines. They stretched above the surrounding brush, pulling at greenbrier growing higher than Nora expected. She took it for an overgrown privet and moved on. The next lane held another green column. The goats gathered around it in the same way, reaching upward while the rest of the herd browsed closer to the ground. Rook, the farm dog that followed Nora from lane to lane, circled the base and sniffed for a while. Then he trotted after the goats. Tess opened the ledger and placed a question mark beside each ribbon color. 2 lanes apart, the herd had found the same shape twice. On the 3rd pass through the red ribbon lane, the goats went straight back to the first green column. Fresh rose shoots had climbed through the older canes, and the herd stripped them quickly. 3 goats rose onto their hind legs for the greenbrier above. One caught a vine in its mouth, planted its feet, and pulled backward. A whole sheet of dead cane slid down with it. Gray bark showed through. Nora moved the goats aside and worked the remaining vines loose with pruning shears. She found a broad trunk under the tangle, scarred by years of pressure from the brush. Near the ground, the trunk widened around an old, uneven swelling. Before she could study it, one doe tested the exposed bark with her teeth. Nora pulled the herd from the lane and built a guard from spare wire panels and 2 fence posts. Whatever the tree was, uncovering it would mean little, if the goats damaged it afterward. The same thing happened in the yellow ribbon lane. Once the herd stripped the softer growth, another large trunk appeared beneath the vines. Tess tied a numbered tag to each tree and stretched a measuring tape between them. In the next lane, the goats exposed only a patch of bark. It was enough. The spot fell almost directly beyond the first two trunks. Nora stood beside the second tree and looked back through the opening. For the first time, she could see the guard around the first one. She turned the next browse lane away from the easiest ground and aimed it along the line the trees had begun to draw. The rain came hard and stayed. Blackberry tips pushed back through the open lanes within days. Multiflora rows sent out fresh shoots, and the wet grass drained power from the portable fence until Nora was walking the line twice each morning. As the higher browse disappeared, the goats began working lower. They nosed around the tree guards and tested anything they could reach. Nora found the second guard leaning against the trunk. Beneath it, a strip of gray bark carried fresh tooth marks. She pulled the herd out before the lane was finished. Tess checked the calendar that evening. Nearly half the dry season was gone, and the fire access route still stopped well short of the culvert. 3 numbered trees gave them a direction, but 3 trees could also have stood around an old house site. Nora moved the goats to a borrowed pasture and spent the next week repairing netting and bracing the guards. Without the herd, the new growth closed over the openings. By the time Wade Doolin came through, he had to push wet canes aside just to find the tags. Could be shade trees, he said. People planted them around houses all the time. Nora lowered her weekly acreage target. She left the next browse lane pointed along the same line. Before leaving, she found the first tag beneath the new leaves, wiped the mud from its number, and drove it deeper into the ground. When the guards were secure, Nora brought the goats back. She aimed the next browse lane along the line of the first 3 trees. The herd worked the way it had before, taking the new growth low to the ground, stretching for vines above, and dragging weakened canes down as they backed away. A 4th trunk appeared before the end of the week. The next position held no living tree. Once the brush thinned, Nora found a rotted stump almost exactly where the spacing suggested it should be. Tess tied a line between the numbered tags. It passed straight across the stump. That empty place belongs to the pattern too, she said. A parallel lane produced 2 more trunks. Near one of them, a goat pawed through loose soil to reach a tender shoot and uncovered the rusted top of an irrigation riser. Nora followed the buried pipe for several yards with a probe. She marked it, then went back to the trees. The pipe supported the idea, but it had not shown her where to look. The goats had done that. Tess replaced several pages of notes with a rough row sketch. Each mark showed a live trunk, a stump, the spacing, and the condition of the bark. Rook lingered around the bases of the older trees, sniffing longer than usual. Nora assumed he was following rodents or buried nuts. When Wade returned, he examined the swollen areas near the lower trunks. Those may be old graft unions, he said, and the bark looks like pecan. He still would not call it an orchard. A few planted trees and an old water line were suggestive, not conclusive. Nora paid for more ribbon and pointed the next lane toward the unfinished row. With the October deadline closing in, Nora cut a cross lane toward the old culvert. The brush there was thicker than anything the goats had faced. Old canes lay woven over fallen limbs, and rusted wire appeared wherever Nora probed the ground. A machine would have entered blind. The goats worked from the outside, stripping fresh growth until the dead tangle loosened enough for Nora to remove it by hand. Beyond that barrier, the rows opened wider. More trunks stood at the same spacing. Some were living, some hollow, and others survived only as stumps. Near the center of the cross lane, the goats uncovered the edge of a low concrete slab. Rusted bolts still rose from it, and an old pipe ran from the slab toward the trees. Wade studied the foundation, then walked the rows again. He checked the lower trunks, the old graft swellings, and several dry husks still caught on high branches. This was a working pecan orchard, he said. Mature trees, grafted stock. The county file had called the parcel a wooded nuisance tract. It contained no orchard plan and no record of the building, whose foundation now sat in the open. Nora looked down the rows the goats had revealed. How many are worth saving? Wade marked 3 kinds of trees. Dangerous ones. Living trees that could wait, and a smaller group strong enough to justify work now. As they examined one of the better trees, Rook lowered his nose to the same patch of soil he had visited before. This time, he scratched once and stayed there. Nora and Tess began with the smallest group Wade believed could still produce. They cleared the orchard floor beneath those trees, repaired one section of irrigation, and paid Wade to shake them when fall came. Pecans dropped, but not in the volume Nora had imagined while uncovering the rows. Some shells held thin kernels. A few trees gave almost nothing. Wade cracked one open and studied it. Neglect leaves a mark, he said, and pecans don't carry the same crop every year. One season won't tell you what this place can do. Tess totaled the sales, then wrote the custom harvest cost beside them. The orchard was alive. It had not paid for its own first test. After the autumn rains, Rook began returning to several of the older trees. Tess added a small mark to the row ledger each time he stopped. The marks gathered around only a few root zones. At one of them, Nora moved the leaves aside and loosened the soil with her fingers. A brown, uneven lump came free beneath her hand. Wade turned it over once. "I know pecans," he said. "I don't know this." Nora photographed it for Dr. Mira Shah, a plant pathologist Wade trusted. Mira's reply came quickly. "Do not eat it. Do not offer it for sale, and do not rake around the roots." A photograph could not prove what kind of fungus Nora had found. That evening, Tess set the small bag of pecans on one side of the table and the unlabeled paper bag on the other. Neither one was a business yet. The culvert still needed repairs. Nora worried the fungi would disappear before Mira could examine them. Against the warning she had been given, she took a hand rake to the root zone where Rook had stopped most often. The soil gave up 6 more lumps. For several minutes, the number alone felt convincing. Then, Nora cleaned them. They were paler than the first specimen, brittle at the edges, and uneven in shape. Most carried almost no aroma. The rake had also exposed shallow feeder roots and erased the exact spots where each piece had been growing. Nora brought the samples to Tess and suggested sending photographs to Elena Torres, a chef who bought specialty produce from nearby farms. Tess placed the first specimen beside the 6 new ones and smelled each in turn. Then she removed Elena's name from the cash flow projection. "Until we can tell ripe from merely found, there is nothing here to sell." When Mira arrived, she confirmed that Nora had collected more material, while destroying much of the useful information from their best zone. Nothing reliable could be gathered there again that season. The planned tasting never reached Elena. Nora looked over the disturbed soil, the exposed roots, and the samples that had promised more than they could deliver. "I found more," she said. "I understood less." She dropped the rake into the bottom of the pickup bed. That afternoon, she called Jonah Pike, a scent dog trainer who worked with farm dogs. Rook would need to learn to sit at a find instead of digging. Jonah told Nora the harder lesson would belong to the person holding the leash. Jonah taught Rook to stop working the moment he found the source of a scent. Instead of pawing at the soil, the dog had to sit and wait. Nora had a rule of her own to learn. She walked entire rows without pointing, circling back, or asking Rook to search harder when he showed no interest. Late that summer, steady rain softened the orchard floor. Mira returned with sample bags and a field microscope. They limited the search to healthy trees where Rook had stopped at least twice, and where Nora had never used the rake. He passed through the first row without sitting. At another tree, he nosed a rotting pecan, glanced at Nora, and moved on. She let him. Near the old irrigation riser, Rook circled the base of a mature tree once. Then again, he sat. Nora knelt, but she waited while Tess read the number from the tree tag, and Mira opened a clean sample bag. Only then did Nora move the soil aside with her fingers. A firm brown body appeared just beneath the surface, Its ridged skin held together when she lifted it, and the aroma reached them before Mira made a cut. Inside, pale veins crossed dense brown flesh. Mira examined the structure in the field, then confirmed it under magnification. Tuberleonii, she said. Pecan truffle. The fungus had not appeared because Nora cleared the orchard. Its underground partnership with the pecan roots had been there already. Her work had made the trees reachable and the soil searchable without tearing through every root zone. Chef Elena Torres later tested a mature specimen and agreed to buy a small trial lot, provided the quality remained consistent. The orchard had gained a second possible crop. Reaching it would require the same discipline Nora had nearly abandoned. Follow the evidence, take only what was ready, and leave the rest in the ground. Elena bought the first trial lot. The payment proved there was a market, but tests still labeled every new entry in the ledger as below-ground observation, not inventory. At another tree, Rook sat. Nora brushed back a thin layer of soil and found a small truffle near the surface. She lifted it just enough to check the aroma. It was faint. She settled it back into place, covered the soil, and wrote a return date on the tree tag. Ahead of her, the goats were entering the last unopened browse lane. Several rose onto their hind legs and pulled at the vines wrapped around another broad trunk. Gray bark appeared between the leaves. Nora slipped the tag into her pocket and walked toward them. Rook followed through the rows already opened, while more trees slowly emerged behind the herd. The $1 property had never offered its value all at once. It revealed one clue at a time, and some of those clues were worth more when left undisturbed.